Not only will we be answering your questions on the air, veteran spacewalker and veteran astronaut Doug Wheelock will be answering questions you are submitting with the hashtag AskNASA on his Twitter account, which is @astro_wheels. So a variety of different ways that you can directly engage in today's spacewalking coverage. And again, as you look at Drew Feustel in the equipment lock section of the Quest airlock, his spacesuit finally passed a leak check on the 4th try, and we are pressing ahead with other spacewalk preparations, but we are about an hour and a half down on today's timeline.
Station airlock, you have a go for Drew's questionnaire. You go.
This is Mission Control Houston. You're continuing to watch the equipment lock section of the crew, the two-compartment Quest airlock on the U.S. segment of the International Space Station. NASA astronaut Scott Tingle on the left side of your screen, who is assisting Norishige Kanai of the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency with the suit up and pre-spacewalk preparations for Drew Feustel and Ricky Arnold. You're looking at Feustel, who is extravehicular crew member number 1, EV1, wearing the suit bearing the red stripes, about to begin the 7th spacewalk of his career. His spacesuit failed 3 leak checks about 2 hours ago. In the last 2 hours, The fourth leak check, however, was successful after sealing surfaces and sealing connections with the arms and the helmet and the glove sections of that extravehicular mobility unit were wiped down. So Foystel is good to go. But the time it took to troubleshoot that leak check issue with Foystel's suit has now cost us a bit of time. We're about an hour and 20 minutes or so down in the timeline for the start of the spacewalk that had been scheduled to get underway shortly after 7 a.m. Central Time, 8 a.m. Eastern Time. That'll be pushed back by about an hour and 20 minutes while we complete other spacewalking preparations. Today's spacewalk comes in the middle of a very busy period for the Expedition 55 crew on board the International Space Station. Just 24 hours ago, an unpiloted Russian cargo craft, the ISS Progress 68, undocked from the Pirs docking compartment on the International Space Station. Its undocking marked an end to the time that the Progress was on board the station. Having arrived last October, you can see the undocking that occurred at 8:50 a.m. Central Time yesterday, 9:50 a.m. Eastern Time. The Progress, loaded with trash, undocked from the Pirs docking compartment following a stay that began with its arrival at the station last October. The Progress was sent off to a safe distance away from the International Space Station for about a month worth of engineering experiments that will be conducted by Russian flight controllers over at the Russian Mission Control Center. That Progress is to be deorbited on April 25th and will burn up harmlessly over the South Pacific. So with the Progress well away from the International Space Station, and after today's spacewalk, next up will be the scheduled launch of the Spacex Dragon cargo craft from Florida next Monday, April 2nd. That launch is scheduled for 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 3:30 p.m. Central Time. Launch coverage on NASA TV will begin at 4 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Central. The Spacex CRS-14, or Cargo Resupply Mission number 14, to the International Space Station under SpaceX's contract with NASA will result in an arrival of the Dragon cargo craft at the International Space Station next Wednesday, April 4th, where it will be captured by Japanese astronaut Norishige Kanai, backed up by NASA's Scott Tingle, using the station's Canadian-built robotic arm. It will be berthed to the Earth-facing port of the Harmony module of the International Space Station, carrying about 5,000 pounds of scientific experiments and supplies for the crew on board the International Space Station. But the first order of business is today's spacewalk, again, the start of which is running slightly behind schedule because of some troubleshooting that was required to solve several failed leak checks on Drew Foystel's spacesuit. That suit is now airtight, in good shape, and pressurized. The crew soon will be purging those suits and going through other pre-spacewalk preparations. And again, we are running about an hour and a half behind the timeline. We'll see if any of that time can be made up as we move along here with the final steps in preparing Foystel and hatch in the crew lock section of the Quest airlock. Today's spacewalk by Foystel and Arnold has a number of objectives to increase the maintenance and upgrade capability of station systems. The lead spacewalk officer for today's excursion, Grant Slusser, provides us with a nice comprehensive view of all of the activities that lie ahead throughout the course of today.
We're going to start the EVA at the airlock with both crew coming outside. Once we get outside, we'll start with EV2, working over to the port truss where he's going to ingress the arm to get ready for the RBVM task, or radiator beam valve module jumper removal task. As he's doing that, EV1 is going to go aft port to node 3 in cone, where we're going to install some external wireless communication antennas. On a previous EVA, the handrails that we're replacing have been removed, and the new handrails that we have taking out are going to have the antennas installed for this wireless communication system outside. We're going to start on the nadir side, deploying a nadir antenna and a plate. It's going to replace the handrail that we had removed previously. Once we get that antenna installed, then we're going to move up to the zenith side, where we're going to install another on-orbit installable handrail with an antenna. After we get the two handrails installed with the antennas, and we're going to connect the two cables. Prior to the pressurized mating adapter being removed, we installed a cable in there to connect these two, and we're going to connect them underneath the PMA cover and then down to the nadir antenna. Once both antennas are installed and the cables are hooked up, then EV1 is going to go back to the airlock and change out bags with this bag to the large CP8 camera group bag that we're going to deploy. As a team, EV1 and EV2 will work together. While EV1 was working on the EWC antennas, EV2 has been steadily working to get the RBVM jumpers removed. We're going to start with the heater cable electrical connections. Once those are removed, then we're going to remove the clamps holding down the RBVM jumpers and remove both jumpers. This is an indication of the RBVM side, or the radiator beam valve module side. After that, we're going to go to the radiator side of these jumpers and remove those. Once we have both jumpers removed, he's going to stow them on his bag configuration on the outside and prepare for the next task of the camera group. EV1 is going to go out to that same area EV2 is at, so he's going to go out to the port side of the truss where camera port 8 is zenith. He's going to prepare and deploy the bag with the new camera group and get ready for EV from the RBVM. You see here it's a short transfer over from the RBVM jumpers to the camera group. This is a camera port 8. The pan and tilt has stopped working, so we're going to pan and tilt that unit down into the stowed location before we remove it. So both crew will work together to get this camera group out. The first thing is moving it to the stowed location so we can remove it. After that, we'll lock the pan and tilt unit and disconnect the electrical cable. Once that's disconnected, then we'll position ourselves to remove the camera. We have an HD camera and a standard camera. We're going to reuse this high definition camera, so we'll remove that prior to removing the camera group. Once that's removed, then we'll remove the camera group, which is the camera and the light. And he'll hand it down to EV1, who will hand up the new camera group. While EV2 is working on the new camera group to get it installed, EV1 will be packing up the failed unit and taking it back to the airlock. As EV1's completing that translation back to the airlock and getting a get-ahead bag there, EV2 is going to continue with the camera install. We'll start with the standard camera and the light install. Once we're complete with that, then we'll work on the HD camera, putting the HD camera that we removed previously back on to the camera group. After installing the HD camera, we'll reconnect the electricals to get it all powered up, and we'll be complete with this task. EV1's back. We're going to transfer bags. If we have enough time, we're going to go after a couple of get-aheads while the crew is on the arm. EV1 is going to take back the jumper bag and put it in the airlock. For this video, we have not shown the get-ahead, so EV2 is going to get off the arm there at the port truss, and EV1 is going to go get ready for the next EVA. We're going to remove a jumper from behind the MLI on the starboard truss and take that down to the PFCS. For the next EVA, the PFCS relocate. They're going to be swapping out 2 pump flow control sub-assemblies. So we're going to help them and get a little bit ahead by removing this jumper and deploying it down at the PFCS on the port side of the lab. And then he's going to be complete for the day. EV2 is going to take the APFR out of the arm that he's been riding and take it to that same location again, trying to set the next EVA up to get a little bit ahead when they go out the door so they don't have to move these items down to the work area. So he's going to take it to the port side of the lab where he's going to deploy that down at the PFCS locations. Once we get that installed, then both crew are going to return to the airlock and come inside.
And you're looking at Grant Slusser, today's lead spacewalk officer, who has worked with Feustel and Arnold and all of the rest of his backroom operators to put together all of the elements of today's excursion by Feustel and Arnold, which will be the 209th spacewalk in support of space station assembly, maintenance, and upgrades. This spacewalk is now scheduled to begin somewhere in the neighborhood of about 8:30 a.m. Central Time, 9:30 Eastern Time, following some delays caused by the completion of leak checks to Drew Feustel's spacesuit. Those leak checks are complete. Both his suit and Ricky Arnold's suit are airtight, and the suits have undergone their purge. The next order of business will be the what is called the Ensued light exercise Rebreathe protocol that will slightly increase the two spacewalkers as they are passively biding their time now in the equipment lock section of the airlock. That will ensure that any residual nitrogen is purged from their bloodstreams, preventing any situation known as decompression sickness or the bends from occurring when they step out into the vacuum of space a little bit later this morning. Here in the flight control room, shift handover is complete. The Orbit 2 team is now on console. Tony Sacacci is the flight director for this spacewalk today. At the bottom of your screen in the white shirt, he has just handed over from Flight Director Ed Van Cise, who is sitting to his right, who presided over the overnight pre-spacewalk preparations for the crew. There are another pair of Capcoms who have just come on, spacecraft communicators who have come on. Standing is Leslie Ringo. She will be the Capcom talking to Scott Tingle and Norishige Kanai during the period up through and including the pre-depressurization of the crew lock section of the Quest airlock. And to her right is Japanese astronaut Aki Hoshide, veteran astronaut who will be the ground IV or intravehicular crew member who will be talking directly to Feustel and Arnold as they work their procedures outside of the Quest airlock throughout the course of the day. On the left of your screen is a former EVA officer, Alex Kanalakos, who is now a spacecraft communicator. In the blue shirt, he also has been working overnight with Ed Van Cise, guiding the two spacewalkers through their pre-spacewalk preparations.
Houston airlock hatch is open, and we started 3 minutes timer for the purging.
Copy, Nemo.
Houston airlock on 1. We have completed the 8 minutes total purge, time 11:01, and we are ready to start in situ pre-breathe protocol.
Copy, 11:01, Nemo. And before we start the exercise, we'd like you to move the free end of the flexible vent duct into node 1.
Teamwork.
This is Mission Control Houston. Norishige Kanai of the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency in the equipment lock section of the Quest airlock, talking to spacecraft communicator Alex Kanalakos here in Mission Control on the progress of pre-spacewalk preparations. We are running behind the timeline for the day. We now expect the spacewalk to get underway somewhere in the neighborhood of about 8:30 a.m. Central Time. We're about an hour and a half down on the timeline because of issues that arose earlier this morning, maybe about 2 hours ago or so now, with Drew Feustel's suit that failed 3 leak checks. Various components, the arms of the suit, the helmet, the gloves were removed. Sealing surfaces and sealing connections were wiped down by Scott Tingle, NASA flight engineer for Expedition 55, who is assisting with the spacewalk preparations along with Kenai. As you look at this shot in the equipment lock section of Quest, Feustel is on the right, wearing the suit bearing the red stripes, as you can see on his legs. He is extravehicular crew member number 1 for today's spacewalk, soon to begin the 7th spacewalk of his career. On the left, Ricky Arnold, extravehicular crew member number 2, EV2, wearing the suit with no stripes. The crew beginning to move their legs and arms to increase their metabolic rate in what is known as the Ensued lightweight exercise pre-breathe protocol, the ISLE protocol as it is known. This increases the flow of oxygen through their bloodstreams, eliminating any residual nitrogen from their bloodstreams and preventing any condition known as the bends or decompression sickness from incurring as they move out into the void of space after they float through that hatchway into the crew lock section of Quest and close the hatch and depressurize that section of the airlock in advance of the start of the spacewalk, which is now scheduled to begin about 2.5 hours from now, around 8:30 a.m. Central Time. But again, as we said, we ran behind in our preparations today because of a series of failed leak checks on Drew Feustel's suit. However, troubleshooting proved successful. The sealing surfaces were wiped down. The suit was repressurized and everything is in good shape now. Both suits, both Feustel's suit and Arnold's suit, are in excellent shape, ready to support today's spacewalk. We'll be joined shortly here on console by veteran spacewalk officer Art Thomason to discuss the objectives of today's excursion outside of the Quest airlock by Feustel and Arnold. Again, the 209th spacewalk in support of space station assembly, maintenance, and upgrades. At this hour, the International Space Station is flying 254 miles above the Earth, moving from southwest to northeast, flying over Madagascar in an orbit inclined 51.6 degrees to either side of the equator.
Stop exercise in 3, 2, 1, mark. starting cycle 2 in 3, 2, 1, begin.
And good morning once again from the International Space Station Flight Control Room here at Mission Control in Houston. With us today is another veteran spacewalk officer, since that's the theme of the day. That's Art Thomason. Art, welcome with us this morning. Thanks for being with us on a rainy morning here in Southeast Texas.
Thanks, Rob.
The spacewalk today by Feustel and Arnold, it's sort of a grab bag of activities that will improve and upgrade station systems and set the stage for upcoming spacewalks and upcoming payload arrivals and those types of things. Can you give us a rundown of what's on tap for Feustel and Arnold?
Yeah, sure. There's 3 major tasks on the spacewalk today. The first one will be to install a wireless communication system on the outside of Node 3. So it consists of 2 antennas and the cabling that runs out to the antennas. And these antennas are going to communicate with future science experiments that are on the outside of Space Station. The next task is going to be to remove a jumper. So this jumper runs out to the radiator, which is part of the cooling system for Space Station. There was a leak identified, and this seems to be the culprit of that leak. So they're going to remove that jumper, bring it inside, and then replace it on a later spacewalk, fly up a new one. So hopefully this is something that's going to be able to improve the radiator performance, because we had to shut down a section of the radiator to accommodate this. And then final task, both crew members will work together on this one. We'll have Ricky on the arm, and Drew will be working free float, and they're going to replace a camera. This is a camera that's on camera port 8, and the reason we want to replace it is the standard definition camera lost the pan tilt capability, so it can't be commanded. It's just kind of stuck in one spot. So they're going to take that camera and light off, replace it with a new one, and then the high definition camera that's attached to that one's still in good shape, so they'll take that one off for the one that they remove, put it on the new one, and get that installed. If everything goes well, those are completed ahead of schedule or before the consumables run out. Then we have a couple other tasks that they're going to do to get ready for the next spacewalk. So that will be to remove a portable foot restraint. So this foot restraint is going to be needed for the next EVA to remove a PFCS that we have on the outside of station. There's also a jumper that's outside of station that they're going to need to move to a new location that's going to help them with the task that they're doing on the next one.
Art, a little bit unexpected today was the failed leak checks on Drew Feustel's suit. Finally, the fourth time was the charm. His suit is in good shape now, airtight, and they're pressing ahead. We lost a little bit down on the timeline, although the spacewalk will remain intact. If you were the EVA officer back there and you heard all this, what are the mitigating circumstances that have to be conducted by the crew and the support crew in the equipment lock to overcome a series of failed leak checks on a suit?
Yeah, so with any failed leak check, you try to look for the source of the leak, obviously. In a lot of cases, so there's many seals all over the suit. I mean, the suit is great that there's so many components you can change out so that it can fit pretty much anyone, but that means that there's also various seals. So there's a procedure that we run, but it has the crew kind of go through and the IV crew member listen to different areas, see if they can identify where the leak is coming from. So that's always a good place to start. And once you can find the smoking gun, then that's when you go through and clean it, make sure, even things as small as a hair sometimes can cause a leak. So you make sure that everything's good there and change it all out. So sounds like that's what the team did, and they're ready to go.
Frequently asked question over the past few days. Okay, so 8 days ago, Drew and Ricky were on a Russian rocket heading out of the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan en route to the space station. They only arrived 6 days ago, and here they are ready to go for a spacewalk. This almost is a throwback to the old space shuttle days, but even though they're veteran spacewalkers, the consolidation of preparations in the timeline, what kind of challenges does that pose?
Yeah, I mean, there's good and bad things. Some of the good things about it is that they were on the ground recently, so sometimes it's easier to communicate with them. There's more of a chance that they got to see it before they left, maybe even in the pool. Some of the challenges is that you kind of takes a while to get your space legs when you're on orbit, so just kind of getting used to moving around again, those kind of things. Fortunately for Drew and Ricky, they both have both flown before, both on shuttle and did spacewalks on shuttle, so this is kind of old hat for them. This is the way they're used to doing it, so it sounds like they adapted very well and are ready to go for this one.
Final question. 1998, first spacewalk in ISS assembly. To put the first two components together, the first element of the space station coming up on the 20th anniversary of its launch. Could you guys in the EVA world ever have conceived that we would be over 200 spacewalks at this point, over months and months of spacewalking time for the crew members, both U.S. and Russian crew members, at this point to put the station in the configuration that it is today?
Yeah, it's a truly amazing feat, and just being a part of it is definitely an honor. I think it's one of those things that you take just a step at a time. You look at what the next few spacewalks are and go from there. But yeah, when you look back and see all that's been done, and you can walk the halls here and see the pictures to show space station and how it's grown, it's very impressive.
Art Thomason, veteran spacewalk officer, with us this morning here in Mission Control as spacewalk preparations press ahead for the start of today's excursion outside of the Quest airlock by Drew Feustel and Ricky Arnold. Art, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you.
I am available to do step 4 of the Untitled Rebreathe protocol.
What? last week.
And Nemo, are you asking to take over and pick up? Is that what you're asking? Begin exercise in 3,
Actually,
2, 1, mark.
Things, but step 4 and step 11, I can help. It's the appropriate time.
Not working.
Checking. Airlock Houston for Nemo.
Alex.
You have a go for steps 4 through 11 at your convenience. A reminder, in step 4, we are looking for 31.5 amp hours for both EMUs.
31.5 for both.
Good read. Stop exercise in 3, 2, 1, mark.
This is Mission Control Houston, a good view inside the equipment lock section of the Quest airlock as Japanese astronaut Norishige Kanai of the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency floats through the open hatchway to the crew lock section of Quest, where Drew Feustel on the right in the suit bearing the red stripes and Ricky Arnold on the left will be entering soon. At the end of their pre-breathe procedures, that hatchway will be closed behind them. They will then be ready for a final series of suit checks, communications checks. As a precursor to the depressurization of the crew lock section, the opening of the outer thermal cover and the hatch, and the start of today's spacewalk at the point at which they put their suits on internal battery power. As we mentioned earlier, today's preparations running some 1 hour, 20 minutes or so behind schedule because of a longer period of time that was required to complete a successful leak check on Drew Feustel's suit. It took 4 shots at verifying that Feustel had an airtight suit. You're looking at Feustel here in an airlock camera. The gloves, the arms on his extravehicular mobility unit and the helmet had to be removed, and the sealing surfaces and sealing connections had to be wiped down in order to reattach those components and then repressurize the suit to verify that he had an airtight suit, which he does. Both suits for Feustel and Arnold are in excellent shape. While we have a moment or two, we're taking your questions on social media during today's spacewalk coverage. The first of the day coming from Charles Olson on hashtag AskNASA. He asks, what is the weight of the suit and the camera? We believe that's a reference to the camera assembly that will be swapped out on the Port 1 truss of the International Space Station at what is called Camera Port 8 later in today's spacewalk. The extravehicular mobility unit on Earth weighs 250 pounds. That's its mass here on Earth. The camera assembly itself measures 44 inches by 22 inches by 25 inches and weighs 100 pounds here on Earth. Of course, it's all weightless, just a matter of moving mass around in the weightlessness of space, but that is the weight of the suit and the camera assembly that will be installed to replace a failed camera assembly on the Port 1 upper outboard area of the truss of the International Space Station later in today's spacewalk. Eric Walker asks, how long will the spacewalk last today? Straightforward, it is scheduled to last 6.5 hours. All U.S. spacewalks outside of the Quest airlock run about 6.5 hours in duration. The crew's spacesuits are verified to go much longer if they need to, based on oxygen and other consumables that the spacesuit provides for the spacewalkers. It's basically a mini spacecraft in its own right that the crew lives and breathes through during the course of their activities in the void of space. The length of the spacewalk will be determined by the flight control team here in Houston as the spacewalk evolves, dependent on how the spacewalkers are doing on their consumables and how their tasks are moving along. Sometimes the crew runs well ahead of the timeline once they're outside. Sometimes they're right on the timeline, and so we'll just follow along and see how long it will take for Feustel and Arnold to complete all of their primary tasks on today's docket. Blue00.mom writes, how much time does it take to put on your gear and perform checks before you can do your spacewalk, and does it vary by mission? That's a great question and very apropos to today's activities. Typically, the crew will awaken about 12 midnight Central Time. About an hour later, after they have a bite to eat, they'll start to climb into their extravehicular mobility gear. And once they do, then they'll run through a series of leak checks like we've been talking about here this morning, conduct the final preparations, which will involve the elimination of any residual nitrogen from their bloodstreams, and then run through a pre-breathe procedure before moving into the crew lock section of the Quest airlock. In all, it's about a 5-hour process to prepare the crew members and their suits before they actually depressurize the crew lock section of Quest and move outside into the void of space to begin their activities, such as we will see about 2 hours from now. In addition to the questions you are submitting on hashtag AskNASA today, veteran astronaut and veteran spacewalker Doug Wheelock is here in Mission Control. Not only will we be answering your questions on the air, but Wheelock as well will be answering questions you submit with the hashtag AskNASA on his own Twitter account, which is @astro_wheels. So you can be talking via social media directly to a veteran spacewalker and a veteran astronaut Doug Wheelock, as well as submitting questions through the normal hashtag procedures as we cover the bases today on social media. In addition to questions you are submitting on hashtag AskNASA and to astronaut Doug Wheelock on his Twitter account, our coverage today not only is on NASA television but on Facebook Live a bit later this morning as the spacewalk progresses shortly after 11 a.m. Central Time, noon Eastern Time. We will be hearing directly and live from veteran flight director Emily Nelson and veteran astronaut Tom Marshburn, who will be in the viewing room overlooking the International Space Station Flight Control Room here at Mission Control to answer your questions as part of the Facebook Live coverage of today's spacewalk. With the pre-breathe protocol continuing for Feustel and Arnold in the equipment lock section of Quest. Again, Feustel on the right as EV1 or extravehicular crew member number 1 wearing the suit with the red stripes. Ricky Arnold wearing the suit with no stripes on the left side of your screen. A clock is now up on the wall for a go for depress. That is about an hour and 11 minutes from now. That implies that we might be in a position to start the spacewalk somewhere in the neighborhood of 8:15 or 8:20 a.m. Central Time. Again, running behind schedule today because of a series of leak checks that took longer than expected for Drew Feustel's suit, but everything's in good shape, and the 2 crew members are moving along in the home stretch of their pre-spacewalk preparations prior to the time that they put their suits on internal battery power to mark the official start of today's spacewalk, which will be the 209th in support of space station assembly, maintenance, and upgrades.
Start cycle 7 in 3, 2, 1, mark. Airlock Houston for Nemo.
Alex.
Nemo, we appreciate all those pictures you took of the tool config. There was one picture that wasn't quite clear. It was of the medium ORU bag with the Node 3 EWC cable routing. What we'd like you to do is just verify that there is a RET going from the plate, the antenna plate that's on the outside of the bag, to the inside of the bag. So the RET should go from the plate to the inside of the bag.
I will double check.
Thank you.
Alex, you are absolutely right. The antenna with 0640 alpha is securely attached to the bag using two adjustables, but it's not wet from the bag.
Copy, Nemo. We would like you to add an additional RET from the antenna plate to the inside of the bag, one of the tether points on the inside of the bag. There may be an external RET already available for that. Otherwise, just add one from the tether staging area.
I see a free RET touched outside of the back handrail. So if it's okay, I'm gonna use this RET.
That is acceptable, and just ensure that that's not the airlock RET.
Small RET. Just both ends are attached to the two stanchions of the handle.
5 minutes to think about it.
Perfect, Nemo. Use that to attach the plate to the inside of the bag.
I will use this RET from plate to the inside of the bag.
Good read. Stop exercise in 3,
Alex,
2, 1.
Actually, you suggested one end of the RET attached to the plate, the other end stay outside of the bag. That way he can easily grab the other end. Is that okay?
Checking. Nemo, back with you. We like your plan. We like Drew's plan. Copy, you're okay.
Copy. Now the plate is attached with RET. The other end of the small is attached to the outside of the bag on one of the function of the handrail.
Begin exercise, cycle 8 in 3, 2, 1, mark.
Okay.
And we copy, Nemo.
That will make the
And Nemo, we have great video from the airlock camera. Do you mind just showing us that tether config from the airlock camera? We like it, Nemo. Thank you so much. Looks great. Thank you.
Alex, we have a question. Are we supposed to be exercising or resting?
Exercising.
Exercising.
Stop exercise in 3, 2, 1, mark. start cycle 9 in 3, 2, 1, start. Stop exercise in 3, 2, 1, mark.
This is Mission Control Houston. For those of you just joining us on NASA Television and Facebook Live, you're looking into the equipment lock section of the Quest airlock, where veteran NASA astronauts Drew Feustel on the right, wearing the suit bearing the red stripes, and Ricky Arnold on the left with the suit with no stripes, have just completed a period of light exercise in their suits to purge any residual nitrogen out of their bloodstreams as they pre-breathe pure oxygen to prevent any situation known as decompression sickness or the bends from occurring when they step out into the void of space. Just beyond them, through that open hatchway, is the crew lock section of the Quest airlock, where the two spacewalkers will be moving in to a short time from now. We're just under an hour before the go will be given to depressurize the crew lock section of Quest. We're running slightly behind schedule in today's activities because it took longer than expected to complete a series of leak checks on Drew Feustel's spacesuit. There were 3 failed leak checks, so the support crew assisting Feustel and Arnold with their suit up and pre-spacewalk preparations today, that being Norishige Kanai of the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency and Scott Tingle of NASA. They disassembled Feustel's helmet, his gloves, and a portion of other components of his suit, wiped down the seals and the sealing surfaces on the suit, reconnected all of those components, and a good leak check was finally confirmed for Feustel shortly before 5:30 a.m. Central Time. The net result is that we're about an hour and 20 minutes behind the timeline for today, looking for a start of today's spacewalk somewhere in the neighborhood of about 8:20 a.m. Central Time, 9:20 a.m. Eastern Time.
Hey, Drew and Ricky. Tony just wanted to relay a message that he thinks you guys are working harder up there today than in the gym.
Spacecraft communicator Alex Kanellakos, who has been part of the Orbit 1 team in the blue shirt, has been talking to the crew members during their pre-spacewalk preparations today. The flight director on console in the white shirt, who will preside over today's spacewalk, is veteran flight director Tony Sakachi. Seated is Leslie Ringo. She's with the oncoming Orbit 2 team of flight controllers. She'll be talking to the crew up until the time of the depressurization of the crew lock section of Quest. She'll be joined a short time from now by Japanese astronaut Aki Hoshide, who will serve as the ground IV or intravehicular crew member, assisting Feustel and Arnold with all of their procedures once they move outside of the Quest airlock. And once again, back in the equipment lock section of Quest, our two spacewalkers for today. If you were expecting the spacewalk to begin about 20 minutes from now, you can sit back, have another cup of coffee. We're slightly behind the timeline. We're expecting the spacewalk to begin in the neighborhood of about 8:20 a.m. Central Time, 9:20 Eastern Time. We'll keep you posted on a more specific time as we target the beginning of the spacewalk that will be marked at the point at which the suits are placed on internal battery power after the crew has moved into the crew lock section of Quest, closed the hatch behind them, and depressurized Quest, the crew lock section of Quest, down to vacuum.
Stop exercise in 3, 2, 1, mark. All right, guys, that's the completion of your 10 exercises. Airlock Houston for Nemo.
Here.
Nemo, you have a go for step 12 in EMU pre-breathe at GMT 12:01.
Okay, 12:01. Then go for Metox replacement.
Good readback.
4 minutes.
And Drew and Ricky, just want to let you know I'm handing you over to Leslie. It's been a pleasure working with you this morning. And like I always tell you in the MBL, be safe, have fun out there.
And Alex Kanalakos, who used to be a Spacewalk officer here in Mission Control and with the EVA office here at the Johnson Space Center, wishing Feustel and Arnold the best of luck on their spacewalk that will be coming up in about an hour and 20 minutes or so from now, as they move into the final phase of their pre-breathe procedures and other pre-spacewalk activities as they hang on their respective sides of the equipment lock section of the Quest airlock. Again, they'll be moving inside of the crew lock section of Quest a short time from now, and the hatch will be closed behind them as they maneuver themselves into the proper positions in that cramped space inside the crew lock, where several bags of tools and equipment have been staged, including the tools and equipment for the wireless antennas that will be installed on the outside of the Tranquility module to accommodate a payload called EcoStress that will be launched on a future SpaceX Dragon mission. EcoStress is an acronym for the Ecosystem Spaceborne Thermal Radiometer Experiment on Space Station that will be mounted on the experiment platform on the outside of the Japanese Kibo module to measure the temperature of plants and to use that information to better understand how much water plants need and how they respond to the stress of the environment. Those wireless antennas, again, will relay payload data back to payload controllers back on Earth. Also in the bags that have been staged in the crew lock section of Quest is a brand new camera assembly to be installed on the Port 1 truss of the International Space Station at camera port 8 to replace a camera assembly whose pan and tilt unit has failed. A new standard definition camera is part of that assembly. The high definition camera that is currently on the existing assembly on the Port 1 truss will be removed and reinstalled on the new bracket for that camera port as we move along in today's spacewalk. A good view of Drew Feustel in the equipment lock section of the Quest airlock. As we've mentioned throughout the course of our broadcast so far this morning, this will be the 209th spacewalk in support of space station assembly, maintenance, and upgrades. Drew Feustel about to embark on the 7th spacewalk of his career, 42 hours and 18 minutes of spacewalking time accrued on the final Hubble Space Telescope servicing mission, STS-125, that was conducted in 2009, and the next to last space shuttle mission, STS-134, that flew to the International Space Station in May of 2011. Ricky Arnold, who is EV2, he'll be wearing the suit with no stripes today, has previously conducted 2 spacewalks on the STS-119 assembly mission to the station in 2009, accruing 12 hours and 34 minutes of spacewalking time. With Feustel and Arnold having completed their exercise period to increase their metabolic rate and cleanse any residual nitrogen out of their bloodstreams, you're looking at Feustel on the right, Arnold on the left, and the so-called suit IV, or intravehicular crew member, who has helped throughout the course of this morning's activities, Scott Tingle of NASA, floating into the field of view, and Norishige Kanai, the Japanese astronaut, who has been supervising all of the work today. Scott Tingle will be at the controls of the space station's robotic arm as you take a look at him in the equipment lock just floating right above Drew Feustel's head. Tingle will be operating the robotic arm that will maneuver Ricky Arnold around the vicinity of the truss of the International Space Station. Arnold will have his feet mounted in a portable foot restraint for the work associated with the release of clamps and line heaters that will remove two flex hoses from a radiator beam valve module on the truss of the International Space Station. And he will also be in charge of most of the work associated with the removal and replacement of that camera assembly out on the port truss of the International Outpost. This is Mission Control Houston as we continue to watch spacewalk preparations unfold. Soon the two spacewalkers, Drew Feustel and Ricky Arnold, will be assisted out of their current positions on the side walls of the equipment lock section of Quest through the hatchway into the crew lock section of the two-compartment Quest airlock to close the hatch and begin the depressurization of the crew lock of Quest that should get underway about 35 minutes or so from now. Again, if you're just joining us on NASA television and Facebook Live, the crew is running slightly behind schedule. It took longer than expected to complete leak checks to Drew Feustel's spacesuit earlier this morning, and so we're now expecting the start of today's spacewalk to occur shortly after 8 a.m. Central Time, 9 a.m. Eastern Time. We'll keep you posted on all of that. In the meantime, we're continuing to take questions that you're providing for us on social media at the hashtag AskNASA. The next one comes from Suda. He asks, what if an astronaut's harness breaks during a spacewalk and they start floating away from the International Space Station? Great question. You'll see soon that the assistants for today's spacewalkers, Norishige Kanai and Scott Tingle, will be outfitting Drew Feustel and Ricky Arnold with jet-powered backpacks called SAFERs, the acronym of which is Simplified Aid for EVA Rescue. Those are nitrogen-propelled maneuvering units, if you will, in the mold of the old man maneuvering units, but slightly smaller in design. In the highly unlikely event they would become untethered from a variety of tethers and other assisted aids that they have once they're outside on the structure of the International Space Station, they could propel themselves back into the safety of the truss of the station to make their way back to the airlock. So they have the ability to make their way back under the power of those Simplified Aid for EVA Rescue jet-powered backpacks in the unlikely event they would become untethered. The next question comes from Worthington Publish, who asks, what is the longest spacewalk in NASA history? That also would be the longest spacewalk in history, period. 8 hours and 56 minutes that occurred on March 11th, 2001, some 17 years ago, by Jim Voss and Susan Helms on the STS-102 mission, a spacewalk of considerable length in which they laid out the cable configuration for the third in the series of pressurized mating adapters or docking ports on the modules of the International Space Station, and to install a cradle assembly for the Destiny laboratory of the International Space Station on the truss of the International Outpost. 8 hours, 56 minutes, that EVA on March 11th, 2001. If you're interested, the next two longest spacewalks in history, 8 hours, 29 minutes. That was during the STS-49 mission, the maiden flight of the Space Shuttle Endeavour, to retrieve the wayward Intelsat communications satellite, May 13th, 1992. That was a three-man spacewalk, the only three-person spacewalk in history, by Pierre Thuot, Rick Heeb, and Tom Akers to manually capture that Intelsat satellite. And apropos to one of the principals here in Mission Control today, that you'll be seeing and hearing from throughout the course of the spacewalk, the third longest spacewalk in history, 8 hours, 17 minutes, occurring on August 30th, 2012, during Expedition 32 by Sonny Williams and Aki Hoshide, who will be the ground IV or spacewalk communicator, talking directly to Feustel and Arnold when they're outside of the International Space Station today. They removed a faulty main bus switching unit and rigged cables for future Russian module arrivals as they worked in the void of space on August 30th, 2012. And there is a view of Aki Hoshide as he settles into his chair at the Capcom console. Next to him is Leslie Ringo, who will be talking to the crew members inside the International Space Station as required throughout the course of today's activities.
report the time to the ground. Close the purge valve down. Listen, airlock. Resume Ensued Rebreathe clock. 1 to 12:14.
Copy, 12:14.
Listen, airlock. Step 22 of the METOX replacement. 1 minute has been elapsed and both suits are leak tight. Successful leak check.
Copy, Nemo. Thanks for the report.
Listen, we are going back to pre-release protocol, step 13, and starting safer donning from now.
Copy, Nemo. We're following.
This is Mission Control Houston, a good view of the flight control room on the forward row, the flight director's console. In the white shirt is the flight director for today's activities, Tony Sacacci. Seated to his left on the right of your screen in the blue shirt is flight director Anthony Varia, who is sitting with Sacacci today and who will be the lead flight director for the next pair of spacewalks that are coming up a bit later this year in the spring. At the very left-hand side of your screen, Aki Hoshide, who will serve as the ground IV. You can see him on the left side of your screen. Veteran Japanese astronaut. Hoshide will be the spacewalk communicator, talking directly to Drew Feustel and Ricky Arnold as they're outside of the Quest airlock conducting their work. In the back row on the right side of your screen is Grant Slusser, who is the lead spacewalk officer for today's activities. He will be working directly with Flight Director Tony Sacacci and Hoshide to keep the crew on track and to talk to his back room and resolve any issues that may crop up during the course of today's planned 6.5-hour excursion. The next step for the crew in the equipment lock will be to be assisted in donning their simplified aid for EVA rescue backpacks, those jet-powered backpacks that would be used in the highly unlikely event the crew would become untethered during the course of today's activities. You can see the frame for one of the safers coming into the field of view as the suit IV or intravehicular crew member Norishige Kanai works the checklist and talks to the ground here in Houston. As we look at this picture, the International Space Station is flying 254 miles just to the east of the Falkland Islands over the South Atlantic, about to begin a southwest to northeasterly trajectory in an orbit inclined 51.6 degrees to either side of the equator. There is a good look at the end effector on the space station's Canadian-built robotic arm, the Canadarm2. Ricky Arnold will be riding that arm and a portable foot restraint for some of the work that he'll be conducting outside. That will include the disconnection of flex hoses on a radiator beam valve module that were identified as leaking. That radiator beam valve module was vented of its ammonia, so it is ready to have its suspect flex hoses removed. They will be replaced on a future spacewalk. Arnold will also be riding at the end of the robotic arm for the removal and replacement of a camera assembly out on the Port 1 truss of the International Space Station later in today's spacewalk activities. This is Mission Control Houston. We're about to regain our downlink video, and there it is. As you take a look at the backpack of Drew Feustel, that is the simplified aid for EVA rescue jet-powered backpack that Feustel has donned with the assistance of Norishige Kanai and Scott Tingle, who is inside the crew lock section of Quest in the blue shirt that you see there. Feustel is about to be moved into the crew lock section. He'll be followed by Ricky Arnold, who will have his safer unit, as it is called, mounted on the back of his extravehicular mobility unit. He'll join Feustel inside the crew lock section of Quest, as we're about 19 minutes away from the point at which the go for depress would be passed along to the crew from the flight control team here in Mission Control. That'll be after the hatch is closed and the crew has maneuvered itself in the tight quarters of the crew lock section into the most comfortable position to conduct the final systems checks on their respective spacesuits. We had expected the spacewalk to begin about 20 minutes ago, but ran behind on the timeline earlier this morning in the vicinity of about 4 a.m. Central Time, when it took longer than expected to complete leak checks to Drew Feustel's spacesuit. All of that turned out fine, however. He has an airtight suit. All the suit systems are in excellent shape, as are the systems on Ricky Arnold's suit. And a good look at Drew Feustel as extravehicular crew member number 1, wearing the suit, as you see, with the red stripes, not only on his backpack, but also on his legs. And now he's being moved into the crew lock section of Quest to be joined a few minutes from now by his spacewalking colleague for the day, Ricky Arnold, who you see on the left side of your screen. Once the depressurization of the crew lock gets underway, it will be conducted in a two-step fashion. Right now, the pressure inside the crew lock is 14.5 pounds per square inch. It will be depressurized first to 5 pounds per square inch of pressure. And a pause in the depressurization activities will commence for a short period of time to enable the crew to conduct systems checks on their suits and communications checks before the crew lock section is taken down to vacuum. Once that occurs, the crew will be instructed to open the outer thermal cover and then the hatch to the Quest airlock. The official start of the spacewalk will be marked at the point at which the crew places their suits on internal battery power.
on airlock on 1. Step T1, we pushed EMU TD power button, but we did not see green LED on EMU 1 and EMU 2.
Copy and checking. And Nemo, back with you. Can you verify that the REBA is ON on, and that is step 50.
Accurately, we have both EV crew members in EMU's green light on.
Copy, and that's a good config.
Attention, place, command engage.
This is Mission Control Houston to bring you up to date on spacewalk preparations today. The crew woke up shortly after midnight Central Time. Drew Feustel and Ricky Arnold, the two spacewalkers for today's excursion outside of the Quest airlock, moved right into their spacewalk preparations, donned their extravehicular mobility units, and then shortly before 4 a.m. Central Time, a problem was detected with the first of several leak checks for Drew Feustel's suit, he being extravehicular crew member number 1, or EV1, with the suit bearing the red stripes for today's spacewalk. After several tries at removing various components, finally a good leak check was accomplished after sealing surfaces were wiped down and the seals on the helmet interfaces with the suit, the arms and the legs were completed. So Feustel's suit finally passed its leak check, and he and Ricky Arnold are good to go. And as we lost our downlink television signal a few moments ago, Ricky Arnold was being assisted inside the crew lock section of Quest. It's a two-compartment airlock. The outermost compartment, or the innermost compartment of the station, is the equipment lock where the crew suits up. The outermost compartment is the crew lock. The hatch to the crew lock section separating the crew lock from the equipment lock will be closed momentarily, and a short time from now we'll be giving the crew a go for the depressurization of the crew lock section. That will be conducted in a two-step fashion, first down from 14.5 pounds per square inch to 5 pounds of pressure to allow the crew members to conduct systems checks and communications checks with the team here in Mission Control before the crew lock is taken down to vacuum. The official start of today's spacewalk will be measured at the point at which Feustel and Arnold place their suits on internal battery power. Based on that, we're estimating a start time of today's spacewalk somewhere in the neighborhood of about 8:15 a.m. Central Time, 9:15 Eastern Time, about an hour behind schedule. But the crew is all set to complete all of the work planned for today's spacewalk. This is a spacewalk that will be devoted to more upgrades and more maintenance of station systems. We have a narrated animated clip of all of today's activities, compliments of the lead spacewalk officer for today, Grant Slusser. Let's take a look.
We're going to start the EVA at the airlock with both crew coming outside. Once we get outside, we'll start with EV2, working over to the port truss where he's going to ingress the arm to get ready for the RBVM task, or radiator beam valve module jumper removal task. As he's doing that, EV1 is going to go aft port to node 3 in cone, where we're going to install some external wireless communication antennas. On a previous EVA, the handrails that we're replacing have been removed, and the new handrails that we have taking out are going to have the antennas installed for this wireless communication system outside. We're going to start on the nadir side, deploying a nadir antenna and a plate. It's going to replace the handrail that we had removed previously. Once we get that antenna installed, then we're going to move up to the zenith side, where we're going to install another on-orbit installable handrail with an antenna. After we get the two handrails installed with the antennas, and we're going to connect the two cables. Prior to the pressurizing mating adapter being removed, we installed a cable in there to connect these two, and we're going to connect them underneath the PMA cover and then down to the nadir antenna. Once both antennas are installed and the cables are hooked up, then EV1 is going to go back to the airlock and change out bags with this bag to the large CP8 camera group bag that we're going to deploy. As a team, EV1 and EV2 will work together. While EV1 was working on the EWC antennas, EV2 has been steadily working to get the RBVM jumpers removed. We're going to start with the heater cable electrical connections. Once those are removed, then we're going to remove the clamps holding down the RBVM jumpers and remove both jumpers. And this is an indication of the RBVM side, or the radiator beam valve module side. After that, we're going to go to the radiator side of these jumpers and remove those. Once we have both jumpers removed, he's going to stow them on his bag configuration on the outside and prepare for the next task of the camera group. EV1 is going to go out to that same area EV2 is at, so he's going to go out to the port side of the truss where camera port 8 is zenith. He's going to prepare and deploy the bag with the new camera group and get ready for EV1 to translate over from the RBVM. You see here it's a short transfer over from the RBVM jumpers to the camera group. This is a camera port 8. The pan and tilt has stopped working, so we're going to pan and tilt that unit down into the stowed location before we remove it. So both crew will work together to get this camera group out. The first thing is moving it to the stowed location so we can remove it. After that, we'll lock the pan and tilt unit and disconnect the electrical cable. Once that's disconnected, then we'll position ourselves to remove the camera. We have an HD camera and a standard camera. We're going to reuse this high definition camera, so we'll remove that prior to removing the camera group. Once that's removed, then we'll remove the camera group, which is the camera and the light. and he'll hand it down to EV1, who will hand up the new camera group. While EV2 is working on the new camera group to get it installed, EV1 will be packing up the failed unit and taking it back to the airlock. As EV1's completing that translation back to the airlock and getting a get-ahead bag there, EV2 is going to continue with the camera install. We'll start with the standard camera and the light install. Once we're complete with that, then we'll work on the HD camera, putting the HD camera that we removed previously back on to the camera group. After installing the HD camera, we'll reconnect the electricals to get it all powered up, and we'll be complete with this task. EV1's back. We're going to transfer bags. If we have enough time, we're going to go after a couple of get-aheads while the crew is on the arm. EV1 is going to take back the jumper bag and put it in the airlock. For this video, we have not shown the get-ahead, so EV2 is going to get off the arm there at the port truss, and EV1 is going to go get ready for the next EVA. We're going to remove a jumper from behind the MLI on the starboard truss and take that down to the PFCS. For the next EVA, the PFCS relocate. They're going to be swapping out 2 pump flow control sub-assemblies. So we're going to help them and get a little bit ahead by removing this jumper and deploying it down at the PFCS on the port side of the lab. And then he's going to be complete for the day. EV2 is going to take the APFR out of the arm that he's been riding and take it to that same location again, trying to set the next EVA up to get a little bit ahead when they go out the door so they don't have to move these items down to the work area. So he's going to take it to the port side of the lab where he's going to deploy that down at the PFCS locations. Once we get that installed, then both crew are going to return to the airlock and come inside.
And left.
I'm a copy.
So the animation you just saw, Grant Slusser, our lead EVA or spacewalk officer for today's activities, running through all of the work that lies ahead for Drew Feustel and Ricky Arnold. As you just heard a moment ago, Norishige Kanai of the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency in the field of view, reporting back to Mission Control that Scott Tingle has closed the hatch that you see there, separating now the 2 spacewalkers who are behind that hatchway in the crew lock section of Quest from Kanai and Tingle, who are in the equipment lock section of Quest. A short time from now, the green light will be given for the start of the depressurization of the crew lock section that will set the stage for the start of today's spacewalk, likely to begin in the neighborhood of about 8:15 a.m. Central Time. While we have a moment or two, let's take a couple of additional questions submitted on social media for us today. At the hashtag of Ask NASA, Miss Spillers writes in and says, what happens if an astronaut runs out of air during a spacewalk? That would be highly unlikely. We monitor the oxygen levels and other consumable levels in the 2 crew members' spacesuits throughout the crew's time outside in the void of space. In the unlikely event a suit problem would occur and oxygen would be depleted sooner than later, we would direct the crew member back into the safety of the crew lock section of Quest where they are at the moment. And Sai Karthik asks, how do you take care of the light and ultraviolet rays from the sun from damaging the spacewalkers' eyes? Their helmets are specially designed to protect them from the harmful effect of ultraviolet rays from the sun through their visors.
And Airlock Houston on 1. Drew and Ricky, want to let you guys know you were hot mic on Space to Ground 1. And Nemo, you have a go for step 73.
Copy. Go for 73.
AB1 copies. 2 copies. Thanks, Leslie.
And Ricky of UIA, please check switch depress pump power off, OFF.
What did he say? Say again, Nemo.
Depress, check switch depress pump power off.
It is OFF.
Copy. Check depress pump enable LED on.
LED's on.
Okay, we are going to depress Q card. Switch depress pump.
We are standing by for the start of the depressurization of the crew lock section of Quest.
Okay.
The crew running slightly behind schedule today because of a longer period of time that was required earlier this morning to complete leak checks to Drew Feustel's spacesuit. But now everything is in readiness for the start of the 209th spacewalk in support of space station assembly and maintenance.
Less than 5.5.
The International Space Station flying in an orbit inclined 51.6 degrees to either side of the equator, moving from southwest to northeast, just over the capital of Afghanistan, Kabul, about to move over the westernmost areas of China, as we are prepared for the third spacewalk of the year out of the Quest airlock and the fourth spacewalk overall from the International Space Station. Depressurization now underway at 7:58 a.m. Central Time.
I'm in the green. In the green. It's going to keep coming up a little bit. Yep. Stable at 5. I'm stable at 5 as well. Press valve. It's working. Yep.
Once again, as the depressurization of the Quest airlock's crew lock section is underway, we'll stop at 5 pounds of pressure in the crew lock for a few minutes to allow the two spacewalkers to conduct suit checks and systems checks one more time. The depressurization will then resume down to vacuum. The crew will open the outer thermal cover to the Quest airlock, then open the hatch itself, and on approval of mission control here, will place their suits on internal battery power that will mark the official start of today's spacewalk. Good view of Norishige Kanai of the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency and Scott Tingle right at the hatchway. Those two will be returning to Earth on June 3rd in their Soyuz MS-07 spacecraft, along with Russian cosmonaut Anton Shkaplerov for a landing in south-central Kazakhstan.
Hold just under 5. Yeah, that's got the tape. your valve as loud as mine?
Yeah.
We have gone into a handover between satellites on the tracking and data relay satellite system. We'll be regaining our downlink TV and voice communication capability with the crew on board the International Space Station a short time from now. Again, the International Space Station is currently flying near the border of China and Mongolia at an altitude of 254 statute miles. Here in the flight control room, the Orbit 2 team of flight controllers led by Flight Director Tony Sakachi, right there at the Flight Director console in the white shirt, second from the right at the bottom of your screen. He is presiding over today's spacewalk. A pair of space flight communicators are on duty to his right, Leslie Ringo, who is maintaining communications with the crew up until the point that they're ready to go out the door. And on the far left of your screen is Japanese astronaut Aki Hoshide, who will be the spacewalk communicator talking directly to Feustel and Arnold during the course of today's activities for them outside in the void of space.
Actually hear the airflow out of the valve. Yeah. But you didn't notice that before.
Just to reset some of the statistics, this will be the 209th spacewalk in support of space station assembly, maintenance, and upgrades, the 7th in Drew Feustel's career, the 3rd for Ricky Arnold. Once outside, and they activate their helmet cameras that will provide us an up-close and personal view of their tasks as they see them. Drew Feustel's helmet camera will be marked by the number 17 in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. Ricky Arnold's helmet camera will bear the number 18.
Pressure 350 for 259er.
Depressurization continuing, no issues. We're heading down to 5 pounds of pressure per square inch, where we'll take a pause to allow the flight control team here to conduct systems checks and for the crew to conduct communications checks with mission control before the depressurization resumes down to vacuum.
stable. 2. I'm showing 5.1, 4.2, 4.8 is suit. Okay.
Okay, Ricky, please close the best pump isolation valve.
It is closed.
Copy, close. Step 5, the leak check on the display, please. Leak check, question mark, and yes, and follow the direction.
And we have paused the depressurization of the crew lock for a short period of time at 5 pounds of pressure per square inch, per the flight rules, taking systems and communications checks before the depressurization resumes down to vacuum.
Check complete for 2.
Copy 2.
Check complete for EV1.
EV1 and both EV1, EV2. Check auto actuator EVA.
Work. And work.
Both suits in good shape, reported back to mission control.
I think so. Okay, EV1, O2 actuator, EVA. And EV2, actuator, EVA.
Copy 1 and 2. Okay, EV2, depress pump manual isolation valve, open please.
Okay, cut it back open.
And the maker, emergency MPEG, open please.
And we've resumed the depressurization of the crew lock section of Quest down to vacuum.
Monitor 50 less than 5.5.
81 copies. 2 copies.
Pressure is 240 and the next stop will be 103.
Suit P is steady. Gauge P is just under 5. Okay, EV1 the same.